This episode is sponsored by Word of Life, a religious education curriculum that calls students, parents, teachers, and catechists to pursue holiness in their daily lives. Created in partnership by the Augustine Institute and Ascension Press, Word of Life helps Catholic schools and parishes meet the challenges and needs of proclaiming the gospel today. Word of Life uses 4 key themes to awaken an authentic Catholic identity and demonstrates how the truths of the faith speak to the human heart. The curriculum strives to support parents in their role as primary catechists of their children. Through interactive activities, videos, and other digital resources, students and parents can benefit from faith formation materials in the classroom and at home. The Word of Life curriculum explores who we are as human persons, what our purpose in life is, why the faith is relevant in our modern culture, and how to live a truly integrated life of virtue through the graces offered by the Church. Word of Life is proud to serve over 50,000 students in more than 700 schools and religious education programs across the United States. Learn more about Word of Life and how to bring it to your parish or school by visiting wordoflifeseries.org, wordoflifeseries.org.
Hey everybody, welcome to Conversations with Jackie and Bobby. This is Jackie, one of your hosts, and today I'm interviewing the lovely Lillian Fallon, who wrote a book called Theology of Style, and it's awesome. I've read it. It's beautiful. Welcome, Lillian.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I want you to share your story, and we're going to talk about your book. So I want you to share a little bit about your journey, your story, and then we're going to talk about why you wrote the book.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when I was a kid, I always loved personal style, fashion, getting dressed up, and that passion continued as I was... Do you want me to tell my story, like my whole story, or do you want me to be like, hey, I'm Lily, I live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania?
No, tell your whole story. We want to hear your whole story.
Okay. So I was a kid who was always interested in clothing, but I also was born and raised, or baptized Catholic and raised Catholic. And in high school, I started thinking more critically about how my faith and this passion for fashion came together. So I was like, does this interest and love for clothing make me materialistic? Should I kind of push this aside and focus on more serious things? So instead of going to fashion school, I went to Ave Maria University. And I thought going there was just kind of like, all right, forget about the fashion dreams. But actually going there was the thing that led me on this journey to really a much more fulfilling expression of fashion and personal style. So when I was there, I took Theology of the Body, and that completely changed my perspective on materiality. Because before that, I thought materiality, like the materiality of the body and just materialism in general, was something that should be entirely avoided. But JP2 explains that the body in its materiality expresses the soul, makes visible the soul. So it was in that I was like, wait a minute, that means that the things that we put on our bodies must be important too, and they can express the soul as well, or aid in the expression. So I really was like, let's go, let's pursue this. So I went to New York City. I worked in fashion for 4 years until I decided to leave the fashion industry. It wasn't fulfilling anymore, and I really felt like I was being called out of that. And I started pursuing this mission of Theology of Style. So that looks like my my Instagram, talking to other women about it, giving talks, and then ultimately this book, which is now available for ordering, which is insane to say. But yeah, so that's kind of my story. Now I'm a public speaker. But I also work at my diocese. So yeah.
Awesome. And you know what? At Ave Maria, you took your class with Dr. Waldstein, right?
Oh, yeah. Changed my life.
And he is amazing. He translated the theology of the body into English. Yeah. He speaks like, how many languages? 8, 10, something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
I took a course with him at the Theology of the Body Institute.
You did?
Most of it went over my head. But he was like this holy man who was so brilliant, but so humble.
Yes.
Has like a bunch of kids. And it was like being in the presence of JP2, just his love, his passion, his brilliance. And so I can see why in his class you just fell in love with theology of the body.
Right, because his passion really came through, and the way that he described relationships and marriage and masculinity and femininity, he described it with such joy and just a love for it that it wasn't this thing where it was like, oh, well, you have to really make sure that, you know, you keep your body in check because your body is the thing that can like drag you down to hell because of temptation. And it was like he reframed the conversation for me on just the human person. And I was like, I want more of that. I want to have that perspective. And so, yeah, completely formed, like just changed how I see the human person, which is everything.
Yeah, and that the body is good. Yeah. And it is through the body. And actually what you're saying in this book, even what we wear that makes visible the invisible.
Yeah.
So even through our body, our style, we're showing the dignity, the beauty of our body.
Yeah, exactly. And that it's this opportunity to see ourselves as God sees us. Like, I really like to emphasize that the end goal isn't personal style. Like, the end goal isn't you have this like amazing look and your wardrobe is totally perfect and your style is so cool and everybody looks up to the way that you dress. It's really not about that. It's really just using clothing, the way you dress yourself, as a tool for understanding how you were made in the image of God and to see yourself as God sees you, which is he sees you unrepeatable. He sees you as somebody who is just so one of a kind and that he wants you to exist with him for eternity. So the more that we understand who we are to God, the more that just transforms every aspect of our life. So I really just want personal style to just be a tool that we can use to understand our worth and not something that like dictates our worth. Like it's really not about like what you wear or how you look doesn't determine your worth. It's really like the opposite. Like how you express yourself should be a reflection of your full understanding of your whole, your body, soul unity and exactly how God made you. So,
and I'm sure when you went to New York City, that's exactly what everyone believes, right?
Oh yeah, everybody's just walking around with a really great perspective of the human person there.
So tell us what it was like working in the fashion industry, how it was being a Catholic in that industry. What was that like?
It was wild. It was so weird because when I first got there, I like stepped on the train and I was wearing some bright red pencil skirt with a stripy top, and I was like, let's go, expression of self. And but then when I kind of looked around, everybody sort of looked the same. I was like, isn't this supposed to be New York where everybody's like walking around like totally one of a kind? But actually there's a lot of conformity in the city, a lot of assimilating to what the culture is telling you who you should be. And so I actually found myself feeling pretty isolated, which a lot of people say that like, oh, I'm in New York and I actually feel super lonely. If you have values or beliefs that are different to the mainstream culture in New York, it can feel kind of, I don't know. I remember when all the like political things were happening and I didn't agree with most of people's beliefs in New York. I was like, if they knew what I believed, would they really just hate me? Would they really just think that I deserved to not have any rights? And would they just not like me as a person? And so sometimes when you're in that type of an industry, it can feel really like you don't belong. But I really invested in my Catholic community there, which the Catholic NYC community is great. But the more that I decided to kind of stop looking for affirmation from the world and stop looking for affirmation from the fashion industry and started looking for affirmation from God. That was when my confidence transformed, my personal style actually came back. Like, I had started dressing while I was in New York, very trendy and very much just looking like everybody else, because I felt like that was necessary to be successful in fashion. And I also, we all just want to belong. Like, we want to belong. We want to fit in. It's the same pressure that we feel in high school. But it was in that trying to conform to the industry and really just fit in with all of them that my faith really suffered, that my confidence really plummeted. And then when I actually made the tangible decision to stop shopping fast fashion, so I stopped shopping at Zara and I stopped shopping at Forever 21. When I made that decision to no longer do that, but then also I stopped looking at fashion magazines and I stopped following fashion bloggers. It was then that I was like, how does God see me? Like, what does he desire for me to express in my physical self? And so when I did that, I noticed a really big change. And that was when I really started writing a lot more about this theology of style idea. And that's kind of, that was the New York City experience when it came to trying to fit in.
Yeah. And tell us more about fast fashion and what that is for people who don't know.
Yes. Okay. So fast fashion is basically, it's not the same as fashion magazines where you have designer labels that are creating fashion week shows. Really what fast fashion is are these corporations that will make the same or very similar garments to designer ones. They usually rip off designer stuff, but they produce that stuff. They produce those clothing in third world countries typically, where they employ people for close to no money. The hours of work are ridiculous. It's like they don't get any breaks. It's usually pretty dangerous in those factories. And because they're cutting costs on all of these things, and there's no regulations for that in these third world countries, and then they just ship over all the clothes, you end up with a lot of very cheaply made clothing that people are being, encouraged to buy. And then these trends they can produce those things very quickly in that business model where they're like, okay, we're making these clothes based on trends that come and go every 2-3 weeks. So these clothing, the garments are just very cheaply made. And I think the biggest, most egregious offense here is the treatment of the workers in those factories. So that was the big thing that propelled me to stop shopping fast fashion. So I mostly started shopping thrift stores. But yeah, fast fashion is unfortunately what we see at like our malls and Target and stuff. It's really hard to get around, and it's very hard to make that switch entirely to an ethical or a sustainable wardrobe.
Yeah, because in general, it's very expensive when you try to not shop fast fashion. Yeah. And it's like it's easy, right? It's easy to go to all these places. I mean, even me, I'm like, hey, staple things, fast fashion. But you're right, like quality pieces last long unless you're a mom who has kids spit up and poop on them all the time. And no amount of OxyClean can get out dried yellow poop. So but that's the goal. The goal would be, so for any of you listening or watching, the goal would be that you know where your clothing comes from. You don't shop at these places as much, but that's a goal, right? It's like, and a lot, people who don't have money, and I mean, including myself, I am such a cheap person. Me too. And I grew up in that kind of, my parents were very cheap, but it's like buying a shirt more than $10. is so much money.
Yeah.
So it's just
I
realizing
know.
the situation and all that stuff that you just said.
That's why I very much recommend trying to do secondhand stuff, because most of the things that I buy are from the thrift store. So and also it allows you to experiment a bit more with your personal style and have fun, because instead of going to, expensive stores and you're like, hey, I really want to try something different with my style, and spending like $100 on something that's a little bit of like a risk or an experiment. If you go thrift store shopping, you can try different things and have fun with your style, and it's going to be like $30 for a bunch of stuff instead of hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you can find really cool stuff from like 1940s, 50s.
Yes. Oh, I have some very cool items from the thrift store.
Yeah, totally classic. Things that aren't fast fashion that will last even just in style, but even in garments, fabric. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us more about Theology of Style, because the middle of your book reads like I'm reading Theology of the Body, which is pretty awesome, because somebody who's interested in style is going to pick up your book and be like, whoa, I'm learning all about theology of the body. And I thought I was picking up a style book. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So that was one of the things, even when I started promoting this book, because when I finished it and people were excited, because a lot of people have been following along on this journey since I started writing about it back in like 2017. And I really wanted to make clear, hey, this is really a book that talks about style, but it's not a style guide. It's not a how-to. You're not going to open it up and be like, okay, now I know how to build my wardrobe, flatter my body shape, wear the right colors for my skin tone. It's really just uses style as a vehicle for breaking down these theological truths of the human person. So when I was writing it, the beginning of it is an explanation for why personal style is something that's legitimate and worth considering. Because I think a lot of people think of style and they're like, that's kind of silly or vain. But in our day-to-day expression of self, we don't see always that connection between the invisible and the visible and the invisible. And I think the thing that struck me the most when I started this mission was that the things that we wear can really be a testament to that relationship between the body and soul. And that was transformative for me in understanding the human person. So I really wanted to break down, okay, like what does that even mean when we say that we're made in the image of God? And how do we live that out in our day-to-day lives? Because the truths of theology of the body, like we sometimes think about it as theology of the body is only for couples, or it's only for people who are married or people who are discerning marriage. But really, it's just about the anthropology of the human person and how we're made. And we live that out in our day-to-day lives. So I talk about in the book, like, when we're constantly seeking connection with others, and we are made for unity. So personal style is a natural mode of communication. We learn so much about who the person is before they even open their mouths, just us based on like looking at what they're wearing. We gain so much data on who they are. They're telling us things. And they're sharing. It's this unique sharing moment. And when we think about Gaudium et Spes, so in Theology of the Body, St. John Paul II really forms his arguments around Gaudium et Spes, which is an encyclical document that talks about, there's this section in it that says, man who is made in God's likeness can only find himself except through a sincere gift of self. So that, like, we can only find ourselves except through sincere gift of ourselves. And we're constantly seeking that out in our day-to-day lives. Like when we're just us talking right now, we're trying to find connection and unity with each other by having this conversation, or people who are listening are trying to understand and have that connection with others, using their personal style, or just having connection, just like listening to people. I listen to podcasts and I'm like, oh, I want to feel connected to other people, the people who are giving this podcast. So we are always seeking that. And if personal style is this mode of communication and connection, it can really be a huge part of that primordial, that like original call to having union with those around us. And I also get a bit into masculinity and femininity and how those, you know, are a big part of the communication between the human person. But yeah, that was kind of a big part of the book, was this like, how does personal style fit into this ultimate call towards unity, not only with each other, but ultimately with God.
Awesome. And I kind of say in my women's sessions talks that I quote, like JP2 says, that we as human beings are the crown of creation, right? We're the last to be created. And that woman, he never said that, like I've looked for it, but like people have said like woman is like the jewel on the crown of creation, because we are the last to be created. We are the most complex, beautiful creature in all of creation. And the fact that we are more complex in our bodies than men, because we can do something they cannot. We can bear life, but also our beauty. We are inherently more beautiful than men. And people have been like, how dare you say that? But no, it's actually true that we are more beautiful. Inherently. That's why like 98% of advertisements use women's bodies. Now they use it improperly. They use women as objects. They use women's bodies to sell their products. They don't use men in Speedos to sell their burgers. They use women, right? So they use women as objects. But there's something inherently beautiful about a woman's body. I love that you talk about how style, like even how the fashion industry notices that. Can you share a little bit about that, like how the style for men versus women? And I love how you go into detail, because I'm not a fashion major. I don't understand, like people have to help me. I love decor and I love decorating. So decorating a house for me is much easier than understanding style, but I think I'm starting to get it. But anyways, share about that.
Well, I mean, clearly I'm like on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Say that again?
I got nothing on my wall. I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum as you. Like you and I are like the inverse, because like look at like my walls have nothing on them right now, and you're like in this beautiful kitchen with flowers everywhere.
I love flowers. Give me flowers.
I love them too. But yeah, to your point, yes. So in humanity, we totally recognize the difference between men and women. It's so interesting because in our culture, they're trying to erase the difference between men and women, and they're trying to erase femininity and kind of just like blob us all together. But in our culture, there is such a basic understanding of the difference, and it's always been there. And it's not just the patriarchy who's been like, women and men are different. It's like, no, it's who we are, and that's so wonderfully beautiful that we are different. And instead of seeing the role of women as like not comparing to men, it's like, let's look at how highly privileged and how wonderfully just, I don't know, that I talk about like the raised status of women in creation in my book. And so this is so the difference between men and women is something that we have always recognized in our culture, and it's definitely felt through the beauty industry, the fashion industry, all of the industries. But the problem is that anything that is good and beautiful and true, the devil is going to try and attack. I mean, this goes all the way back to Eve. Like, hello, the devil was like, hey, like, you want to eat this apple? The devil understood the power of the woman. He understood. He was like, I gotta go for her. Okay, I gotta get her to influence everybody.
Because the devil hates love and life, because God is love. Yes. And it says in scripture in John 10:10 that the devil, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and the devil hates life. Yeah. And if a woman can bear life, yes, the devil's gonna come after her.
Exactly. And I talk about in my book how the beauty of woman, our physical beauty, for lack of a better word, is a symptom of the beauty of our whole person, the beauty of our soul, the beauty of our heart. And I like to really emphasize the beauty of woman, because anytime we encounter something that is beautiful, whether it's a magnificent sunset or the beautiful church or a painting or flowers, the human person contemplates, where did that come from? All beauty encourages those who encounter it to contemplate the divine. And it's the same thing that goes for woman. Those who encounter the beauty of a woman are more inclined to be like, wow, where did this beautiful woman come from? And the heart of a woman also is a home. And so when we think about beauty and we're encountering beauty, like when we're in a church, we contemplate the divine home. Where does all of this come from? Like we think about heaven. And similarly, the beauty of a woman, when we're homesick, I talk about how we're actually momsick, because the heart of a woman is really a home. We are a shelter for those in our lives. We shelter them. We take care of them. We have such an immense capacity for suffering and for holding others in our hearts. And that is something that is a direct correlation between how God made woman to really point towards the divine home. And when Adam and Eve, like in the garden, Adam encounters Eve and he says, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Because he encounters Eve's humanity and how she's made in the image of God, he recognizes that she's made in the image of God. He then can understand how he's made in the image of God. That's constantly being acted out over and over again in the relationship between men and women, even today. And I think that when it comes to the things that we wear, like, because I'm always talking like these like big like theological things, and I'm like, okay, like, but how does this look on like a day-to-day practical kind of tangible expression that might seem small and maybe not significant, but actually is? When we think about how men and women dress, women, when we walk into a department store, we tend to be more attracted to the bright colors and the textures of something and the fabrics that flow. We are more attracted to the spirit of things. We're more attracted to just like the color, kind of the soul of things. Whereas when you look at the men's side of the clothing store, it's typically more muted tones, garments that are more flattering to his physique and his strength and his frame, and there's kind of a stability in that, a strength. And men's fashion doesn't change as much as women.
Right.
It's usually more consistent. And I think that also speaks to the stability of masculinity, and that's very much something that we desire in men, is that stability and that strength. Whereas the counterpart is this kind of, like this creativity. The creative heart of woman is bright, colorful, very expressive. And so when those come together, there's that harmony and that balance between the two, and it's so beautiful. I was in Mass with a guy that I was like dating over the summer, and the priest was talking about how creativity and order are very much made for each other. And we both kind of like looked at each other, because I'm like very creative and he's very orderly. And we were like, yeah. And so it's just, that's something that's lived out in our day-to-day lives. But the things that we wear can also further emphasize that.
And I love how you strike the balance in your book about not, again, you were like the patriarchy, like you do such a good job of striking the middle. Like, some people in our culture, because our culture is trying to erase masculinity, femininity, some people go the opposite way. And they're like, let's be 1950s housewives and everyone has to wear these A-line dresses, which I love, by the way. That fits me, by the way.
Same, yeah.
But they try to go ultra, like the opposite way. It's like every woman has to dress like this, and every man has to be like this. And you strike such a good balance down the middle, saying, even in masculinity, femininity, and how we dress, there can be degrees of, what do you say, like?
Just a lot of diversity even within masculinity and femininity. It's like your masculinity or femininity is unchanging. Like, I really like to emphasize the fact that, like, if you've been born a man or born a woman, like, your masculinity and femininity is in every fiber of your being, not just physically, but in your soul. And that can't be changed no matter what you're wearing. And so sometimes I find that in certain cultures or circles, even within the Catholic world, there's so much focus on, like, you have to dress hyper feminine in order to be feminine. And I'm like, you're feminine no matter what. Like, if you shaved your head, you're feminine. I'm sorry. Like, you're still a woman. You're still feminine. And yeah, I think that it's really important to really think about personal style as something that is a reflection of creativity and a reflection that, like, you are one of a kind. And if you are able to dress, if you're able to dress in a way that is creative, but also, like, dignifies your body and pays reverence to your masculinity and femininity, then by all means, like, have fun with how you're dressing. It doesn't have to be this super stereotypical or, like, one way. I think that's the thing that I really want to sometimes push back on, is that there isn't just one way to dress as a Catholic, and there isn't just one way to look. There's so many wonderful different people in our church and in our faith, and we are all diverse human beings. So why not dress in a way that expresses how one of a kind you are? And I really do want to make the caveat of, like, but make sure that you are dignifying your body. Make sure that you're paying reverence to your masculinity and your femininity in the way that you dress. Don't objectify yourself. That is, egregious offense to yourself and, as well as to God. So dress in a way that pays reverence to who you are and who God is. But you can still have a lot of fun expression in the way that you dress.
And God love you, Lillian. You hit the dreaded modesty section in the last part of your book, which is so needed because you, again, right down the middle, because virtue lies in the middle, you kind of say what the extremes are, that some people, one extreme is, I can do whatever I want with my body. I can dress however I want. I can show my cleavage, my butt, and I can do, because I love my body, right? Like this one extreme. And then the other extreme is you all must wear potato sacks and you must not show your shape. And even your knees are sexualized. And how dare you show your shoulder or your collarbone? Like, you name it, girl. And I'm like, God love you, Lily. Like, I was so proud of you when you named, because in the Catholic world, yeah, there are people who say, like, if a woman wears pants, that is immodest, that is a sin. So you name the kind of the shameless people who are like, I can wear whatever I want, I can show all my boobies and I can show this, and then you name the people who are the hyper modest, and you experienced that in your youth, your childhood. And if you could share that story that you shared, like, people are sexualizing your knees, you know what I'm saying? So I'm so glad you named it, but you go down the middle just as JP2 would.
Thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. It was a nerve-wracking chapter, because I was like, I really don't want to push anybody away, and I really want to, but I still really think that this conversation is very necessary. So yeah, I definitely experienced in my youth, like, those kind of awkward, weird interventions that actually ended up making me feel more objectified than anything. And the story that I shared in my book is that I was at a dance and I was wearing a dress that met all of the modesty guidelines that were required at the dance, but I was pulled aside in the beginning of the dance and brought back to a room And the woman who was running the event said that when I spun the skirt, which was kind of like a sheath kind of dress, it wasn't an A-line where, because sometimes when you spin with that, it's like, oh my gosh, I can see your hiney, like, relax. And you got to like be careful when you're wearing some of those like super those dresses that spin. So this was a dress that like when I spun, the skirt came up just like a little bit. And she said that when you spin, you can see your knees, and there are boys and priests here. And I was like, what? Huh? I was like 15 or something at the time. And all of a sudden I was like, priests are here and they're looking at my knees. Like maybe like it was such an unnecessary, like weird sexualization that was being placed upon me that really wasn't, like she was trying to do the opposite, or she really believed that she was trying to like, I don't know, like save me from something, but it just ended up making me be like, what? And I'm guaranteed that the priests there weren't like, oh, that like 15-year-old's knees. Ooh, like, girl. Come on. Yeah. And so I was just like, okay. So she made me change. She had this bag full of like clothes that were so like, I was a teenager, so I was very like picky about what I'm wearing. And so I kind of pick through the bag and I find this like velvet long skirt, and I just wear it with my like denim jacket. I had a denim jacket that I just like buttoned up, and I was like, all right. So, I had to emerge from the party like in a completely different outfit. And I was like, well, everybody knows that I got caught.
Showing those knees, girl.
So showing my knees. And I was just very like, because it made me feel ashamed. I felt ashamed, and then I felt, oh my gosh, this body of mine is something that is dangerous and could potentially be leading like these boys and priests astray. And it was my knees. And so in the book, I really emphasize like, look, there are body parts that are like a part of your sexual reproductive system, or when you wear them, it's easy for people who see you to imagine what you look like naked. So be conscious of stuff like that. But at what point are we sexualizing body parts that are not sexual? Like a knee, a shoulder, a collarbone? Because the conversation around modesty that's predominantly been, that's been dominated mostly, are people who are a part of like a Marian modesty cult movement, which started in like the 20s. And it was in reaction to flapper dresses. And so that was a very like different, that was, what was going on culturally, but people have really held on to the, whatever came out at that time, like the priests or bishops who were really speaking out about immodesty at that time and creating the conversation. And there really hasn't been any new conversation since then. And yeah, I think that I really want to emphasize that if we are telling girls that, you have to cover up every inch of skin and your body is, leading people to hell, we are sometimes falling into the exact same trap of objectification, because when literally what, you started out with this conversation where, you have people who are out there and they're like, I don't care, I'm going to show everything, I'm confident, this is feminism, to just like show off my body and I'm whatever. That is an objectification. But so she's saying like, my body is made for use, so I'm going to show it. The other end of the spectrum is saying my body is made for use, so I'm going to hide it and
Amen.
Just completely cover it. So I want Catholics to really be aware of like, are we falling into the same trap of objectification, just like on the other side of the coin? And how do we get to that middle point? And a lot of the middle point has to do with the personal discernment. It's hard because a lot of girls want specific hard and fast rules. And they want the like, well, what can I wear? What can't I wear? I get a lot of girls who are like, can I wear leggings? Can I wear bikinis? Can I do this? And it's hard being like yes or no, because I don't want to boil this topic down to specific rules. And what my real hope is, especially with this book, is if we do the work on the front end of things where we're explaining the value and the unchanging worth of the human person, and specifically talking about this gift of femininity and how it is such a privilege to be a woman. If we help young girls to understand their worth and want to pay reverence to it and to be excited about their femininity and be like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing. Like, I can't believe I get to be made a woman. This is so cool. I want to express that and uphold it. That a strong understanding of their worth will pour out of everything that they do, because we sometimes treat modesty like just like a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, where it's like, okay, you're dressing immodestly, like I'm going to come at you with this really aggressive conversation and a talk about how you look like a skank or something, and then the kid is like, oh my gosh, like I feel even worse now about myself. Because if they're dressing in a way that is objectifying themselves and they're looking for affirmation from the culture and from men, like that is just, we need to address that. Like we need to address where they're looking for affirmation and for their worth. And once we do that, then they will start dressing in a way that reflects that. But if we come at them with rules and shame and saying, hey, you're not like, you don't look like a decent young woman, they're just going to feel even worse about themselves. And then they're going to be like, oh, I'm going to not have anything to do with the Catholic Church anymore because they made me feel bad about myself.
People want rules, and they do that to me too. And I say, listen, I can even give you guidelines. Yeah. I can even tell you what I personally do, but that is not what the Catholic Church teaches. Right?
Right.
I mean, I could say like personally, when I go to Mass, I try to wear dresses that are more towards my knee. I try to cover my shoulders, but that's my shoulder covering is like, I don't know, I just try to wear a little more clothing. And even if I was 110 degrees, it probably just catches my sweat a little better. You know what I'm saying? But these are just Jackie guidelines. The church doesn't ever give you specific guidelines. But people want rules because it's very hard to discern. But you're so right. It comes from the heart. Modesty is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. And I know personally for me, when I had a conversion in my heart and I remember I had this experience. I was 18 when I had my huge conversion. I fell in love with Jesus. And I was wearing this like really low V-neck shirt in my, college class, and I went to go talk to my French professor, and the whole time he was staring at my chest, and I felt different. I felt different than I'd ever had before wearing that, because I felt like, oh my gosh, he's just staring at my chest. Like, I never want to wear this shirt again, because I never want to feel objectified the way I just did. And it was a heart change. Yeah. It was that my heart had changed, and that I wanted to be modest in not just my dress, but in my actions, my speech. Although my speech, I'm still kind of, I'm probably still a little more, I'm a little more crazy. And I say words sometimes that people are like, whoa, I can't believe you just said that. But anyways, my heart had changed. And so my whole, everything, the modesty is not just what we wear, but it's our whole person. And you're exactly right. When we realize the beauty of the body, how beautiful we are, we never want to be objectified. We never want to be looked at like that. And when it comes to modesty, it's about seeing the whole person instead of seeing ourselves as parts. And that's what JP2 in Love and Responsibility, his whole thesis was, we are not meant to be used. We are not meant to be as objects for use. And you can use people in both ways. You can use people just for pleasure, or you could use people, when he talks about sex, as just baby makers. And so you're exactly right that, like, in the Catholic culture, sometimes we objectify people by saying, your body is only for this, and therefore don't show any of it, right?
Right. Yep. No, exactly. It's crazy how the extremes are oftentimes the same problem. And it's just like, it's the same coin, just different sides. And like you said, that virtue is in the middle, and how do we have those conversations with people? And a lot of the time it's just this, like, how do we come to an understanding of the human person? And that's like what I really wanted the book to do, was if you don't understand how you were made, it just impacts every single facet of your life. I had a friend who in New York City said to me, he was like, you know, if you don't understand sex and like what sex is, like in a real anthropological sense of like the purpose of it and why it exists, like why it is, he said, you don't understand anything. If you don't understand sex, you don't understand anything. And that really stuck with me. And it's in the book because it's true. It's like, if you don't understand your call, your purpose as like a human person to ultimately be in union with God in the end, and you don't, like it just impacts everything if you don't understand your worth. And I want personal style just to be something that is another tool in the tool belt of the Catholic woman in how she pursues her faith and how she pursues Christ. That it's something that can just help her, and that it's not this like intense rules. Because sometimes people, when they talk to me about this whole mission, especially, it's funny because it's usually the older men who are like, those young kids are dressing and like whatever, and they don't even care about how they look. And the focus is so much on how like, like young people are failing in how they dress and how they need to look a certain way in order to be acceptable and stuff. And really, like, my book is just about, dress with dignity, but also really use personal style as a way just for understanding how you are one of a kind. But also, like, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Like, we are human beings who make mistakes all the time. And it's not about having the perfect outfit. It's not about having the perfect formula to like how to get dressed. It's like we all make fashion mistakes, but like, are they really fashion mistakes? Like, who cares? I talk about trying to find the balance between caring less without being careless in how you dress. And I mean, like, I'm sitting here, I'm like in a band tee that I think is cool, and I like wanted to deck it out with my like jewelry and stuff. For some people, they might be like, that's just like really like, nah. But I think that we need to not care so much about how we look. Like, the last thing I would want for somebody who reads my book, the takeaway, the last thing I would want is for them to be like, I need to put more effort, like even more like time and energy, and really like have it take up a lot of their mental space when it comes to style. Like, I think that the focus shouldn't be on like caring a ton more about how you look. It's not about like looking a certain way. Like, if this is a tool that is useful to some women in expressing themselves and understanding how they are made, then like by all means use it. But it's not something that I want women to feel beholden to. Like, they have to dress a certain way.
Because you don't.
Yeah, because
sometimes
give, like,
hard and fast rules of style, which is nice, because you're basically saying there are things that we wear, that we put on, that we make beautiful, right? You're like, I feel lovely, I feel beautiful. We don't normally buy things that make us feel really ugly. Although, during the day, again, I wear sweats, my hair is in a bun or a side, but whatever. I can feel beautiful even in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so funny because when I moved out of New York, I had lost all of the things that had made up what I felt was my worth. Like dressing super like cool and stylish and looking like the New York City girl and perfect and whatever. When I lost all of those things, I was at my parents', like living in my teenage bedroom, and I was existing in sweatpants and like my greasy hair. And I was really forced to ask myself, like, where does my worth come from when I don't have any of these things that I thought made up my worth? And sometimes we need to strip back the stuff. Like, if I feel like I can't go outside without wearing tons of makeup or like an amazing outfit, I think that I need to do some work on where I'm getting my worth and value from. And sometimes I say to myself, I need to really commit to my worth. Like, that's something I tell myself, commit to my worth, commit to my worth. And sometimes that means going out in the sweatpants and the greasy hair. And I'm like, I have worth no matter what. And some people push back against that because they get mad at like our culture where everyone's out in pajamas and like don't give a crap about how they look. But I know that for me personally, sometimes when it comes to really working on my my perception of my worth, being seen as flawed and being seen as a raw human being who's not perfect, and saying, I am still worthy. I am still worthy of your respect and your love, no matter how I look. That helps me to commit to my worth, and then to demand that respect from other people in my life who I might feel like only value me for superficial things. Because I think as women, we have a hard time being like, I am still worthy of love and respect and dignity, being treated as somebody with dignity when I am not at my like prettiest or my most fit or whatever. We have a hard time believing that we're worthy of that. And so I think that we need to demand that of ourselves, but then also of others in our lives. And sometimes wearing the sweats and having the greasy hair and not covering up your pimples is a way to do that. It works for me, so.
Yeah, and we want to be loved. Yeah, when we're overweight, we got the muffin top. We want to be loved when we're not wearing makeup.
Yeah.
When our hair is greasy.
Yeah.
And I know some women, my mom, that she would wake up in the early years of marriage. She would wake up before my dad and put makeup on.
Yeah.
Like he would never see her without makeup. Yeah. Like she'd take her makeup off after he went to bed, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But yeah, then she realized like, oh, my husband loves me, not just when I'm perfect and all made up, because that's, again, that very like stereotypical, like you have to be perfect for your husband and be dressed for him at all times and look amazing. And I'm so grateful. I have a husband who loves my muffin top. He loves all of me, even when I look ridiculous and my hair is like, my mascara is all under my eyes because I didn't take it off the night before. Yeah. Like, and that's how God loves us too, no matter what we look like. So I like that. Maybe a challenge for the ladies listening is like once a week, go out without any makeup and looking just like you're wearing your pajamas, because again,
just be raw. Yeah.
The question is your worth coming from other people's likes? How you appear?
Yeah.
Or do you actually believe you're beautiful no matter what? Like, and God created you beautifully.
Exactly. That you are worthy of love just as you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Lillian, is there anything else you want to leave us with today that you want to share about your book that we didn't touch on? I want you to be able to share that if we forgot something.
No, I think that we hit on it. My most favorite thing to talk about is femininity and how that is such a wonderful gift and something to really just be excited about. And that, like, the more that we understand, like, how cool it is to be a woman, the more we're able to combat our culture and all of the stuff that we're being told and how they're trying to erase femininity. I just think it's really important for us to be excited about being a woman and the unchangingness of our femininity. So yeah, that's the section of the book that I'm the most passionate about right now anyway. Like, I go through different sections of my life where I'm like particularly like obsessed with one part and then another part. But yeah, I think that we definitely covered that. But yeah, if anybody is like wondering a bit more, like they want a little teaser trailer of my book, I am on Ascension Presents. You guys are my like Ascension Presents buddies.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. So if anybody wants just like a little snippet of what I talk about, I have some videos that are on the modesty topic, and that goes into femininity as well. And then I have like other personal style ones and worth ones. So if you want like to kind of get a little teaser, check out those on Ascension Presents.
Awesome. And where else can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram. I talk about all this stuff on there as well. So it's at Lillian_Fallon. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Cool.
Lillian, thank you so much for sharing your time and this conversation. And y'all, go get her book, Theology of Style.
Thanks.
It's beautiful. Great read. I could have read it quicker if I didn't have children constantly like, Mom. Oh, yeah. I was like, okay, I can get in 3 pages right now.
Yeah, I don't think my sisters have even read my full book yet because they all have so many kids, and it's like, how do you get in any time?
But it's so great, and it's very readable. And for anyone who doesn't know Theology of the Body, it's such a great primer And for those of us who do know theology of the body, it's so rich. Even though it's like simple to read, it's rich. And you quote Alice von Hildebrand, baller quotes. I mean, you have so many good quotes. I was underlining. I was like,
thank you.
I have so much to underline and highlight.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you for joining me on this podcast. And yeah, for anyone who wants to keep following her, check her out on Instagram on Ascension Presents. So Lillian, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I would love to talk to you. We should just hang out sometime. I would just love for us to hang out.
Are you
guys live?
Pennsylvania now?
Yeah.
Are you in Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
Okay. We're in Dallas.
Oh, okay. I guess I got to come to Dallas.
Come to Dallas. When we're in Pennsylvania, we'll hit you up, girl.
Perfect. Oh, thank you so much.
Right. Thank you. All right, for all y'all listening or watching, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your prayers, and thank you to those who have supported this podcast financially over our Patreon. If you join our Patreon between now, October 2023, through the end of November 2023, you'll get a personalized copy of my newest book, Gaming and the Heroic Life. Join at any tier, and we'll send you a personalized copy. You can also pre-order that book on Amazon or at Ave Maria Press. Type in code ANGEL20 for 20% off. Thank you again for listening. God bless.